Hey, welcome back. So we're going to finish off chapter 5. Let's go into page 114. Number 5, list and describe interventions for common difficult behaviors related to Alzheimer's disease. Agitation is something that you will definitely come across. These residents may be excited, restless, troubled, and is said to be agitated. Situations lead to agitation or triggers. Some situations that may trigger a resident. It may be a change in the routine of the caregiver, new and frustrating experiences, or even television. If a resident is agitated, this is what the nurse aide should do. Try to remove those triggers. If it's the television, we need to turn it off. Find out what the resident like, maybe, if they want to look at something different. Sometimes loudness. I've went in some communities and everything's going on. You got a radio going on. You got a TV going on. It's too much stimulation for those residents usually. So we want it to be a calm environment. Sometimes I've seen them play music, the oldies that's from their time. It's just relaxing. You'll see pictures on the wall that is from their time. It just makes them feel comfortable. It's familiar to them. Even if they have confusion or dementia, this is stuff that they can connect with. So that's that type of environment you want to promote, even in their rooms. Try to remove triggers, keep a routine, and avoid frustration. Help the resident focus on something that's soothing, a familiar activity. It may be going through a picture album and having them talk about their grandkids, talk about their children. Stay calm. Place an arm around the shoulder, pat the resident. This may soothe some residents. Some residents don't want you to touch them, but I told you I like to touch and hug, or more hug. Let me rephrase that. Hug my staff and pat them on the back. And I do that to some residents. I'm talking to them. I may rub their back and I may touch them. So they are used to that, and that can be soothing for some residents. Sundowning is something else that you may see in the facilities, in the communities that you work in. And sundowning is when a person gets restless and agitated as the sun go down. That's why it's called sundowning. And those residents are more up and added in the towards the night time than they are in the daytime. So we call that sundowning. And sundowning may be caused by hunger, fatigue, a change in routine or caregiver, new and frustrating situations. Same thing, right? As the agitation, you see a change in routine, possible change in caregiver, because even though they may not remember your name, remember we talked about that in class, they will remember how you made them feel. So if they feel comfortable with you and you're off and there's a new person doing something totally different, they may feel agitated and uncomfortable. Snacks encourage rest. And some things that you can do as a nurse aide: play soft music. I talked about that. Set a bedtime. If we all have a routine, that's why I say learning what the other aide does that they like. You can recreate that same structure so there's a consistency and continuity in the care that you are giving to that resident. Recognize when it's occurring. Remove caffeine from the diet. We know caffeine is more of a stimulant. That's more of the management team getting back in there. Distract the resident with simple, calm activity like looking at magazines. Sometimes we can get those residents to have fold towels with us, and we'll tell them to maybe shuffle the paper. It just makes them feel busy. Can help. Maintain a daily exercise routine. We talked about the importance of activity with residents, period. Catastrophic reactions. When a resident with Alzheimer's disease overreacts to something, it's called a catastrophic reaction. You may see the same thing over and over. Excuse me. Fatigue, change in routine, difficult choices or tasks, physical pain, hunger. A nurse aide should respond to those reactions as she would do with agitation. And catastrophic reactions or sundowning. Remove those triggers. You need to give a calm environment. The same ideal. Maintain a routine with that resident so that care can become so predictable to them and they feel safe in that environment. Violent behavior. A resident who attacks, hits, or threatens someone is violent. Frustration over stimulation may trigger violence. It can also be triggered by change in routine. Here we are again. Environment or caregiver. Sometimes you may have residents who are new to the facility. They're agitated, they're confused, they don't know what's going on at all. And it's not you, it's a new situation, and it increases their confusion. I've had that happen within 24 hours. After 24 hours, that resident is fine, but it was just a new situation. They were new to the unit, they were new to the building, new to the community, so they're increasingly agitated. They don't know what's going on. They feel unsure, not safe. So our job as caregivers is to make them feel safe. Let them know what you are doing. What is your role? Introducing, and that's why we like to institute that in our communities, is when we have a new resident, we introduce ourselves for those that and let them know, what is my role? What type of service are you providing? I'm a caregiver. My name is Laura. I'm a caregiver, and I will be the one assisting you with showers, helping you get dressed if you need it, toileting if you need it, whatever you need, I will be that one. And that's why we institute that introduction, because we want the residents to know who is serving them. Pacing and wandering is something that's key with residents who have dementia, Alzheimer's disease, and it's just what it is. They walk, they make circles around the building, meaning like they will, walk, pace. My biggest thing I would say for that is definitely make sure the resident is not hungry, need to toilet if they're in pain. Sometimes too, if they're not sleeping enough, or they're sleeping too much rather, that can be increased. Two, if they're not harming themselves, they're not causing harm to someone else, and you've made sure that they're not in pain, they've eaten, that they're eating, they don't need to go to the toilet, their needs are met, their basic needs, like we talked about in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I wouldn't interrupt it. If they're not causing harm, they're not trying to elope or get out of a building, if they pace and they're safe and we've met all their needs, let them pace. I think it's an issue when we are trying to force them to do something too. We can cause agitation then, because we're trying to get them to do something they don't want to do at that moment. So be conscious of that. Because I've seen those residents, and what we've done is actually add a walking program so they can walk around the building with a staff member, or I've seen staff members do tasks with those residents who like to walk around. Once they go to the front of the building, they'll bring that resident with them to get them out of that unit, that memory care unit. So there's creative things we can do versus just trying to make them sit in a certain spot because we want them to sit there. They're not causing harm to anybody else. Let them do it. As long as we know that their basic needs are met and there's not another reason why they're pacing or wandering. We talked about elopements before. Reading your orange and yellow box. That's when a resident's trying to leave the building. They're focused on getting out, and they know how to get out. So those residents, you should know, every community should have an elopement book where there's a picture of the resident, a face sheet. You should be conscious of where your residents are at all times. And there should be a program in place on preventing those elopements. And that's why you have memory care units, not all of them, but most of them. If those residents, memory care units are required, from my understanding, to be locked for safety purposes. If a resident elopes, your responsibility is to notify your nurse immediately. There's usually elopement plan on each unit on what needs to be done. For us, that we all have a certain area we need to look and make sure that resident is not visiting or not in the dining room. And we all have a certain area around the building and in the building that each department is responsible for checking for that resident. So there's a policy in place for every single building for elopements. So make sure you get familiar with what your community elopement policy is. But your main goal is, if once you notice your resident is missing, they're not in the room, they're not in the most common place they're normally in, notify your nurse immediately. Don't wait. Hallucinations or delusions. A resident who sees, hears, smells, tastes, or feels things that are not there are having hallucinations. A resident who believes things that are not true are having delusions. So what's the difference? Both of the things are not true. Hallucinations, a resident who sees, hears, smells, tastes, feels things, even feels things that are not there. Delusions believes things that are not true. Two different things, right? More senses are involved in the hallucination. Delusions is a belief thing. I believe somebody's out to get me. That is a delusion. I see roaches all over the floor and there's no roaches. That is hallucination. All right. Do y'all get the difference? All right. Look at the senses. Think about those examples that will be. And some residents do. They have vivid hallucinations. They see birds flying in the air. That is not birds flying in the air. That's a hallucination. I believe there's a boogeyman underneath my bed. That is a delusion. Those are two different things. If a resident is experiencing hallucinations and delusions, nurse aides should ignore harmless. This is the key. Harmless hallucinations and delusions. Harmless, not causing harm. I would report any incident of hallucination to your nurse so we can decide what it is, what's going on. Is there a root cause? Is there something else going on? But if the resident starts self-harming or doing something that's going to cause harm to themselves or others, that's something that we need to report specifically immediately. We assert a resident who seems agitated or worried, not argue with the resident. It is very important that we don't do that because it's their reality. If you tell me my mom's name is Gina and her name is really Regina, we're going to argue about that because in my mind, I know her name is Regina. And you're trying to tell me something else about my mom that I know. So it's the same idea. If I'm trying to tell you something that you know for sure, and I'm going to try to tell you that that's not true. That's how those residents feel. Even though it's not true, they feel that way. So we want to make sure that we're not causing an argument. We're not frustrating the situation. What I like to say, we go into that situation. There's roaches. I'm going to make sure I get pest control. I'm not going to tell that resident there's not roaches. They see roaches. They do see it. I know it's not there, but there's no need to go into this situation where I'm arguing with the resident about what's there and what's not. My job is to make them feel safe, to make them feel validated. Validation is so important with this because otherwise you're going to be arguing and they won't trust you to care for them. Validated. Okay, yeah. Okay, let me make sure that they come and spray for those roaches. If it means us stumping on the ground, we're going to stump on the ground. If they say there's birds flying in that room, we're going to open up a window, open up the door and let those birds out. And usually those things will resolve it. They've been validated and you've done something practical that they could see help solving that situation, which may be opening the door and letting the birds out, stumping on the ground so that they can know the verse is gone. The roaches are gone. Letting pest control come in there. They may not spray nothing, but they see a pest man has a label on his shirt, come and spray around. It alleviates the idea that there's a roach there because they know that would have taken care of that situation. So don't argue. Be calm. Reassure the resident. Depression. When residents become withdrawn, lack of energy, or do not eat things they used to enjoy, they may feel depressed. Depression may have many causes: loss of independence, inability to cope, feelings of failure or fear, reality of facing a progressive or incurable illness. If a resident is depressed, you need to report those signs and symptoms, encourage independent self-care, talk about moods and feelings if resident wants to, be a good listener, encourage social interaction. We've talked about depression already several times in the classroom and what we can do, and a lot of times helping that resident find the thing that they love to do. If it's journaling, drawing, participating in bingo, whatever it is, encouraging them to go to those activities because a lot of times those residents isolate themselves. They sit in a room. They don't socialize with many people. They start to withdraw. So you catching that all of a sudden change of behavior is a good thing for you to encourage the resident. Hey, we got these things going on. This helps you. You love this. You love when you play, do puzzles with Mr. Smith up the road, next door. So make sure that you're reporting that, but also get to know your residents because this will help you provide some emotional support for them. So read over your inappropriate social behavior. It talks about cursing, name calling, and other behavior. You should definitely not take that person but report it because it's something that we need to figure out what's the cause and what's going on with that resident. Inappropriate sexual behavior, such as removing clothes, touching one's own genitals, trying to touch others can embarrass those who see it. When dealing with such behavior, the nurse aide should not overreact. may reinforce the behavior. She should be sensitive to the nature of the problem. Is the behavior actually intentional? Is it consistent? If distracting the resident does not work, the NA should generally direct him to a private area, and tell the nurse. This is when we would investigate, especially when it's sexual behavior and it's involving someone else or our staff. I gave, I think, examples of that and how proactive as managers we need to be, because we want to make sure that there's no sexual abuse happening, no inappropriate touching to a non-consenting resident, and we definitely don't want you as a staff member to feel uncomfortable in those situations. So make sure that you're not just saying, "Oh, that's Mr. Smith." No, we don't need to excuse behavior that way. We need to figure out what the root cause is so we can solve the problem, because we want you to feel comfortable. We want our residents to feel comfortable. We want that resident specifically to be at their highest and their best place, right? So getting to the bottom of why this behavior, because some medications actually can cause that sexual arousal. I've seen it happen. So it may be a simple thing as changing some medication and doing something totally different. So make sure that we don't excuse that behavior. We don't overreact, but we also don't excuse it and not report it, okay? Hoarding, plaging, taking things that belong to someone else. Person with dementia may honestly think something belongs to them. Hoarding is collecting and putting things away in a guarded way. Some of those things that I've seen this a lot, and sometimes residents who are cognitively aware will do this as a sense of control and loss when they've lost so much. I had a resident, I've seen residents who have lost so much, so they do it as a way of controlling their environment. And some residents, like the book is saying, who have dementia, they really truly believe it's theirs. So involving your management team is important, because you don't want to just remove things without the advice or instruction of your management, because we want that resident, again, to trust you. Because if they suspect that you are the one taking their things, because in their mind it's their things, then they won't trust you and they won't allow you to care for them. So we want to be very sensitive and wise in those situations and report it and get some guidance from your management team. That's the best way to deal with those situations. So we talked about let's talk about sleep disturbances. It talks about that at the top page of 118. Residents with Alzheimer's disease may experience a number of sleep disturbances. If you notice that, make sure the resident gets moderate exercise activity. Make sure that residents participating throughout the day. Because like any of us, if we sleep all day, we're going to be up during the night. Natural sunlight if possible. Reduce light and noise is possible. Discourage sleeping during the day. And a lot of times keeping those residents active is important. It's the most important thing, because that ensures that they have a good night's rest. Because if you're not sleeping well, then you're going to be more agitated in the morning. You're not going to really want to participate in the ADLs. You're not going to want to do anything in the best attitude. And those residents, the impulse control is different, and they can't help it. So we need to all be communicating and conscious of what's going on. And one example of that, I had a resident I've had residents who've had those sleep disturbances, and what would happen is the staff would have a hard time with them in the morning. So we had to talk to the doctor. What can we do to help promote sleep, a good night's rest for those residents? And once we figure out that solution, if it's letting them sleep in a little bit later, if it's giving them maybe a prescribed medication like melatonin, that's more of a management situation to help promote some sleep. Whatever we need to do, maybe it's playing their favorite music at night to soothe them. It's important to promote rest for those residents. We talked about validating throughout the class. I think it's so important for us to validate our elderly residents, because they need it. They're insecure. And I don't know if you say insecure, but they've lost so many things. And we're doing so much for them a lot of times that they really weren't prepared for. So validating their words, validating everything that they're stating, how they feel. You may not understand, but it doesn't mean that you can't validate them, right? So let's be conscious of those opportunities to give value and approve of our elderly residents and whoever we serve. And we need that validation. So how much more do you think an elderly resident who has lost their independence need that validation. So ladies, I want to say thank you for allowing us to do this session over the video. If you have any questions, you already know I'll answer them. Please think about the differences between delivering confusion and dementia. Look over the different things like talked about toileting problems. Look at those, because this book is very good in giving you ways to help those residents participate and help you get those things done that need to be done so that we can properly care for our residents. So please read over those things, because you will be experiencing that and you will see that in the clinical site. Otherwise, I hope that you have a good evening, and thank you again, and I'll see you this week. Bye-bye.